And welcome back to the OHIO podcast, everyone. I'm your host, Buckeye Boggs. That man over there is the wild man, Chris Wilds. And this is another edition of Border Wars, our OHIO podcast, Ohio State recruiting videos that we like to do this time of year, Chris. Of course, we're doing these a little bit later than we normally do. I usually like to hit these out in June, but alas, it's been very busy around here and with the website this year and the YouTube channel growing the way it is. And so we're kind of late to the party here, but there's something very cool about these videos this year than what we've done in the past, and that is we have guests that we are interviewing for these videos. And so here very shortly, after Chris and I go through the top 10 from the state of Indiana for the class of 2025, you're going to hear a Purdue perspective and an Indiana perspective on recruiting, not only from the state of Indiana, but from their team's perspectives as well. And so we get into recruiting the state of Ohio from them and the state of Indiana. And of course, Chris and I are going to look at the state of Indiana and recruiting from the Ohio State perspective. So this is a big Indiana recruiting video from Ohio State perspective and what it means for the Buckeyes. So that being said, Chris, this year is very, very interesting from the Hoosier State for the Buckeyes. This is the first year in a while that I can remember where we went over in Indiana. Now, we didn't go after too many guys, but we normally don't. We normally only go after one or the two of the top guys, and we usually get them. Not this year. We swung and missed on both recruits who we were in on. But that's okay because I don't know how hard we really pursued them.
Right.
So I wouldn't say that this is a bad year for Indiana. I think that the upper echelon of the class looks good, and I do think that high school football in and around Indianapolis is getting better.
Yeah.
And so after I've watched it over the years, I do think high school football in Indiana is continuing to improve. So that being said, Chris, I've got some recruiting slides. We're going to slide in and out in this video, talk about the top 10 recruits. Was Ohio State in on them? Were we pursuing them? What do we think about them before we go to these interviews? And this is going to be a long video, everybody. I understand that. If you need to pause, come back to it. Enjoy.
You're not going to hurt our feelings.
Right. Exactly. Here we go. Number 10. Let's take a look at Cameron Herron from Indiana. So, and here's how we'll do this, guys, is I'm going to give a little bit of information, then Chris is going to give his take, and then we'll just go down the list. So, Cameron Herron, 6'4", 275-pound interior offensive lineman, has a national ranking of 757 in the composite, and ended up committing to the state of Iowa, Chris.
Yeah, and I watched this video, Eric. Not bad, but it didn't blow me away. I'm not going to lie. I think that he needs to develop a little bit better with his hands. His footwork at times seems a little slow to me. But overall, I mean, his technique seems fairly solid. He's kind of, he's a straightforward. I did notice better run blocker than pass blocker. But
true of most Midwestern linemen.
It really is. Overall, I think he's a solid pickup for Iowa. I don't see him as somebody who would have obviously been on Ohio State's radar.
No, he wasn't. We weren't recruiting him.
But you know what? I think he's going to be a solid pickup for Iowa. He's a guy who I think, Iowa's one of those programs that takes 3-star guys, especially on that offensive line and that tight end room, and makes stars out of them.
Yeah, they develop them.
So, yeah, they develop offensive linemen, tight ends, and linebackers as good, if not better, than any other school in the country. So, I think Herron's in the right place.
So, interesting note, Chris, that Herron is one of 3 Warren High School players from Indianapolis in the top 10 overall in the state.
Yeah.
This is one.
Yeah, Warren Central was a stacked team.
If they don't win a state championship, there's something wrong with that coaching staff. My gosh. the talent at that school. All right, number 9 is Benny Patterson. Benny Patterson is a 6'3", 240-pound defensive lineman from Castle, Newborn, Indiana, and rated 682nd, 3-star. He's obviously 3-star, 682nd nationally, and he committed to Cincinnati, Chris.
Yeah, another guy that, I think his ranking is very indicative of the type of player that he is. He is someone who he's aggressive. He seems to get after it, does have some trouble, it looks like at times, shutting some blocks. But overall, his video, and again, these are highlight films, so they show us what they want us to see.
Right.
He gets in there and he does wreak a little chaos. He is a commanding presence along that defensive line.
At number 8, the second of the Warren Central High School recruits we're going to be talking about, Tyrone Burris Jr. Mr. Burris Jr. is 6'4", 235-pound edge rusher, ranked 511th nationally. Decided to go ahead and go to Louisville. He's going to be a Cardinal next year.
Yeah, I mean, I like his quickness, Eric. I think he shows good quickness off the snap. He's agile. He's able to move around quite a bit. He's very athletic. So he's somebody that I think could have easily been ranked a little bit higher, and we may see him slide up this list a little bit as next season goes on. He's somebody that, honestly, I'm a little surprised that he's going to Louisville. I mean, I could have seen this guy at a Big Ten school, probably not a top-tier Big Ten school, but I could have seen this guy playing Big Ten football.
Yeah. Yep. Looks like a Purdue or Illinois guy to me,
Yeah.
in all honesty. All right, this next one's very, very interesting. I actually have some thoughts here, but number 7 is Eugene Hilton Jr. And Mr. Hilton Jr. plays ball in Zionsville, Indiana, which is just north of Indianapolis. I've done a lot of work in Zionsville over the years. He's 6'2", 195-pound, 4-star wide receiver who's going to Wisconsin, and I think his 406th national ranking is way, way too high. This guy is much better than that.
Yeah. You look at this guy, and correct me if I'm not wrong. Is this? Correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't this T.Y. Hilton's son, the former Colts wide receiver?
Is it?
I believe it is. This is a guy who
is it? I don't think
I'm
so.
pretty sure this is T.Y. Hilton's son, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Yeah.
You are correct. You're absolutely correct.
And he plays.
No wonder I like this guy's film. Holy smokes.
Yeah. This guy spent a few years opposite of one Marvin Harrison Jr., his dad did. So, this guy might remind you a little bit of a young man who played at Ohio State.
That's incredible.
I don't think he's got quite the skill set, but yeah.
I loved his film. I thought.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's great.
That makes perfect sense now.
He is going to be a very, very good receiver in Luke Fickell's offense. And I'm not going to lie to you, Eric. I'm a little surprised that, I know I'm saying he's only a 4-star. I'm very surprised that even though he's only a 4-star, that maybe he didn't pique a little interest out of Ohio State. Just given the way we've developed receivers.
Yeah, I think Luke Fickell stole one here.
He's got the tools.
Number 6, Mason Alexander. I like this guy's film too.
Yes.
He's a 6', 180-pound, 4-star cornerback from Hamilton Southeastern in Fishers, Indiana, ranked 337th nationally, and he decided to go to Pitt. Now, he's better in my opinion, he's better than Pitt. I just do.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. This kid, if you watch his film, he's a great cover guy. He's got excellent closing speed. He reads the ball very, very well. He's always at the point of attack. This is a guy, Eric, who easily, and I haven't looked at his list of who was recruiting him 100%, but I'll tell you what, he is much better than Pitt. You are absolutely right. And as you go down through, it looks like nobody outside. Well, Auburn was on the list, so that's a little surprising there that he chose Pitt over. I mean, I see Pitt over Austin Peay or Ball State, but
yeah, his offer list included
Florida,
A&M, Wisconsin. So I mean,
Sparty was on there, Nebraska, and about Oregon. Oregon was on this list.
I don't know if that was a committable offer though, but I do know he took an official visit to Purdue.
He's all over the SEC.
Or excuse me, unofficial visit to Purdue. But I mean, this is a kid who I think was being evaluated, and hear me out.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that his recruitment is completely done.
Yeah, if he starts having a very solid year, especially next year, Eric, look for the big boys to get back in play.
Yeah. All right, number 5. Let's look at the top 5. This is John Anthony Hall. John Anthony Hall is a wide receiver from Fishers, Indiana. So you got Mason Alexander, who goes to Hamilton, Southeastern, and then across town you got John Anthony Hall, who goes to Fishers. I wonder if they're gonna, if that matchup 1-on-1 would be must see TV.
Oh, I would have to think so, because this kid's video
John Anthony
is great.
Hall is a 6'1", 170 wide receiver, 4-star, ranked 236 national. And John Anthony Hall, my man, is obviously got dreams and aspirations beyond the gridiron because he's going to Stanford. This is a kid who's got a mind, to go along with all that skill.
To steal a line from our boy Cardale, he's going somewhere to play school. He ain't going just to play football. But man, let me tell you, Eric, the kid can play football. Tremendous athlete. Not only was he did he get 1,000 yards last season, he was the MVP in the state basketball tournament.
That's a stud.
He's obviously he can high point the ball as well as I think any receiver coming out of high school. He's got very fluid motion, good hands, great footwork. And again, I think that probably a lot of that contributes to basketball. But just, this is a kid who I'm telling you right now, he's coming in and he's an NFL talent. And Stanford has got themselves a real gift here. And like you said with the last gentleman, Eric, if he starts having this kind of performance again that he had this season, look for some big names to get back in play. I wouldn't be surprised if you don't see a Notre Dame or a Northwestern try to climb in there, given they're closer to home and both are, extremely high academically as well.
Yeah, I would. That's a good point. That's a good point with the academics.
And let me tell you, Notre Dame, from what I'm hearing, they're getting ready to start passing around a little bit of that NIL money finally. So, if they get on board and they start spending, because we all know that they've got the donors to put some money in it, Notre Dame could become a team in play on this.
So, next up, number 4, my boy Brock Schott. I love this guy's game. So, Chris.
We love tight ends here, Eric.
Not that long ago, Miami, the U, was tight end U. Mm-hmm. Not that long ago. And Brock Schott is going to try to, bring that back to life down there in Miami. To go from the state of Indiana to the state of Florida and play in Miami might be a little bit of a culture shock for Mr. Schott, but he's got great size at 6'3", 215 pounds. He's ranked 221st nationally, 4-star recruit. He's considered top 10 tight end in the country. So this is someone who obviously wanted a little bit more of the glitz and glamour. And so he's going to shun the local guys in Indiana and Purdue. Didn't really even give much of a look to Notre Dame. This is someone, like I said, I think he wants a little bit of that South Beach.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, Eric, I'm with you. This kid, tremendous, tremendous prospect, great athleticism, good speed, great hands. Eric, and this kid is tough. He
Mm-hmm.
is what you want in not just a tight end. I'm telling you, they get desperate. They could flip this kid around to the other side of the ball. You know, as a junior outside on the edge at linebacker, he racked up 67 tackles, including 32 for loss and 19 sacks.
Yeah.
19 sacks, Eric,
Mm-hmm.
from a tight end.
Yeah.
Yeah, great, great athlete, great, tremendous talent. He's somebody I'm not going to lie. I would have liked to have seen Ohio State in on.
Well, here's what's interesting. He committed to Miami in April.
Yeah,
He took an official visit. His last official visit in June was to Columbus, Ohio. Now, Ohio State ended up going a different direction at tight end,
yes,
but Ohio State was looking at him, and there was some interest, and this was after his commitment. But I think that this guy wants South Beach, so I'm it's kind of is what it is. Number 3, Mark Zachary the fourth. Now, Mark Zachary is the kind of guy that, quite frankly, if it wasn't, let me just put it to you this way: this is a Marcus Freeman dude. Okay,
yeah,
5'10" and a half, 164 pounds, cornerback, ranked 135th nationally. He's considered the 15th best corner in the country. Um, Obviously, Ohio State had communicated with him, but this was a Notre Dame guy, I think, from the beginning. Um, he committed all the way back in May,
hmm
and he did take it. He did take an official visit to Florida, but at the end of the day, this is the type of guy that's going to help Marcus turn around Notre Dame and keep them going into the future with 10, 11, 12 win seasons. This is a big, big win for Marcus Freeman, and he's in his back door. He's kind of
yeah,
Marcus Freeman has to outduel Ohio State, Michigan, and even the boys from the South when it comes to the top talent in Indiana if he really truly wants to compete nationally. Now, the Notre Dame fans are going to argue with me on that one because they say we recruit nationally because we're a national program. I understand that, but when you have when you have that talent in your back door, you need to take advantage of it. He
yeah,
did in this instance.
yeah. And I'll tell you, I like this kid a lot. You know, he's always around the ball, but more importantly, he's got great speed. He has, I think, just incredible awareness of what's going on the field. And if you look at his videos, Eric, I mean, this is a guy that is just everywhere. Great closing speed, jumps routes very, very well, very fluid in his motion, great movement with the hips. Just a kid that has everything you want in a corner. And something else I noticed in his videos, this is not a kid who, like you see a lot of these kids playing 7, 8, 10 yards off the line of scrimmage. He's not afraid to get up there and play right on the line of scrimmage and almost play what's the old style bump and run with some of these guys. So, I mean, this is a kid that I think is a tremendous get for Marcus Freeman. Far too good to be in a Marcus Freeman program, if you ask me, Eric. Just you know, he's a great get, and he's another one. I'm not going to lie. You know, and I think that Ohio State might have been more in play if we weren't already just so stacked.
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean, we've got
and his
top
size, I
tier
think.
guys
I think his size
across
is
the
kind of a
board.
turnoff for Ohio State a little
It
bit.
is when you look at the
He's on a
guys we've
smaller
got.
size.
But you know what? He's small, but he's wily.
Now, this next guy is definitely not small. We're talking about someone who Ohio State wanted and didn't get. Damon Shanklin, the number 2 recruit from the state of Indiana. And depends on which service you're looking at. Some have him number 1. 104th overall nationally in the composite. 6'4", 230 pounds, and from again that vaunted Warren Central High School in Indianapolis, Indiana, going to LSU. Now that is interesting to me that he's going down to LSU
That
country
that sounds to me like maybe some old connections that were maybe made.
with
Brian
Kelly.
Kelly.
Maybe I don't know.
Hey,
I'm surprised we just didn't. I mean, I know we wanted him. I know we offered him. I know we were recruiting him, but never really felt like we were truly in on it. So maybe you're right.
yeah, I mean, and the kid he is, he's everything you want in a defensive end. He is perfect height at 6'4.5". 230, obviously, somebody who I think needs to put, a little bit of muscle on if you're going to have him as a down defensive end. But, great length. Just he has everything that you would want out of a guy who is going to play that defensive end. He never stops. He's got that motor that never stops. He is absolutely, great use of his hands. He attacks the line of scrimmage, really, really strong. And just he is a guy who is flexible, has that bend we always like to talk about when you're talking about the defensive ends to be able to get around and force those tackles to try to guard him. So, yeah, he's a guy that Eric, like we talked about earlier when we talked about Hilton. This is a kid that I'm telling you right now, he's an NFL talent.
Do
Barring
you think?
injury,
Do you think
he's an
he?
NFL talent.
Do you think? Do you think he's 100% committed
Uh, you know, in the past, I would say yes, but in today's day and age,
with NIL?
until
It's a
you
different
until you
story, huh?
until you step on campus, nobody's 110% committed.
Mm, that's a good point.
Until you've signed and stepped on campus, no one's 100% committed.
All right. Number one, according to the 247 Sports Composites, is Marion Dye. And again, there are some who believe that Damon Shanklin is better. But Marion Dye gets the nod here based off of all three major recruiting services in the composite, 102 nationally, 6'5", 270. So he's got 40 pounds on Shanklin, and he also has an inch. And he ended up deciding to go to Tennessee. Again, this is another one who Larry Johnson was on. He was recruiting, but for some reason, he just was a strong get to Tennessee. I think NIL had a lot to play with this one.
Absolutely, Eric. And I'll tell you, he's another kid with a great, great video. If you watch the recruiting video, I mean, you're talking about a kid who, he plays that down defensive end, but he can just get to the quarterback from so many different angles. His technique is really great. He can speed rush. He can bull rush. He is excellent at bending his body around the tackles, going up inside, shedding blocks. Everything he does is just wonderful. And again, I do like his size a little bit better than I actually do Shanklin's, although I do like Shanklin's speed and athleticism a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, Shanklin's a guy who, yes, he could play defensive end, but you could almost put him into that the jack position or an outside linebacker position where you stand him up because he's a little more slight. With Dye at 270 pounds and 6'5", he's a guy who's got to play that down defensive line.
Yep.
He's not going to be.
There's a world where Dye slides inside too.
Yes, absolutely. Much the way we talked about, where we've seen it with on a rare occasion with JT Tuimoloau.
Mm-hmm.
That type of
Actually,
thing.
that's what I was going to call him. I was like, Marion Dye is a poor man's JTT.
Yes, I don't
on
disagree.
Film. Yep. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to transition over to our interviews with both the Hoosier Huddle and the Boiler Express podcast. We're going to get their takes on recruiting for not only Indiana and Purdue, how they look at Ohio and recruiting, but their take on the state of Indiana and high school recruiting as well. Chris and I will be right back. All right, guys, welcome back to the OHIO podcast. And I am joined by Sammy Jacobs. He is the host of the Hoosier Huddle, our sister podcast on the College Huddle, covering the Indiana Hoosiers. And on this episode of Border Wars, Sammy, we're going to talk about the state of Indiana. Of course, that you are our neighbors just to the west of us. And Ohio State has done a pretty good job of going into Indiana and pretty much taking who we want, kind of like, I guess you would say, kind of Pirates of the Caribbean. We kind of go take what we want, right? But all of a sudden, I have noticed that Indiana looks a little different in 2025 recruiting cycle. If you go over to 247 Sports and you check out the state of Indiana, I see a lot of Notre Dame symbols going up and down Indiana's list there. And of course, Indiana's depending on what part of the state you're talking about, you're close to Louisville, you're close to, if you're in the western part of the state, Champaign, which means Illinois. You got Notre Dame at the northern part of the state. And of course, Ohio State loves to go check out what's going on over in Indianapolis from year to year. Overall, how would you say the health of the state of Indiana when it comes to high school football? It seems like it's gotten better over the years as I've watched this and covered recruiting.
Yeah, I think it has as well. Look, I didn't grow up in Indiana. I came in from New York City, and it was average. I would say. Look, it's a large state in terms of number of schools and stuff like that, but I think the quality of player that you see going to like a big name school has definitely increased. And maybe that's because the media coverage of it has increased too. But it's still clearly behind Ohio, maybe some of Illinois and Chicago. But you do have those, like Ben Davis, which is a local school in Indianapolis, will go play a national team every year. Like IMG, I think they played, somebody down in Cincinnati before too.
I think they played St. X, if I recall correct. St. Dave, which is the most well-known Catholic school in Cincinnati that does a lot of recruiting. Yeah,
so
recruited a lot.
You have Center Grove, where a couple of Buckeyes have gone. To me, Ohio State has had a lot of success in Fort Wayne too. Maybe that has changed over the recent years, and it's not just football. You go back to those Greg Oden and Mike Connolly days. They took them right out of Indianapolis. And that made Hoosier basketball fans thrilled. Right. But it's I would say football is becoming bigger in Indiana, and I think a lot of that is due to like what Peyton Manning did with the Colts. This is a basketball and largely a swimming state. Willie King said it last night at the U.S. Olympic trials. Indiana is a swimming state. But it's basketball now that, people have enjoyed football, have become fans when Peyton Manning is, winning a Super Bowl with the Colts. I think that's more in the culture now as, okay, we're going to focus a little bit more on football in high school too.
New head coach in Indiana, Coach Cignetti. Have you gotten – I know since he's new, it's hard to kind of get your thumb on what maybe his recruiting style is or what they're – are they going to become more regionalized? Are they going to try to say, hey, we're going to own Indianapolis? Or what kind of philosophy have you been able to maybe sift from what he's done so far?
I don't think it's much of a change from what Tom out. Maybe he goes to Florida a little bit less. But, like all college coaches, we're going to set up a 5-hour border and that's going to be the pipelines. It takes you into, 5 hours from Bloomington or Indianapolis really takes you into some good recruiting. You get into Chicago, you get into all of Ohio, the Detroit area.
St. Louis.
And then St. Louis, you get into, some of the Tennessee areas too. And then you fly down to Florida. They've recruited Texas a little bit better. And now that you're going out west, maybe you open up California. But, looking at IU's 2025 class, you see a lot of guys. I think this is because they've been coaching in Virginia, Maryland, Virginia, there's North Carolina's in there.
So he still has those old JMU pipelines that he's tapped into. That makes sense.
And Bob Bostad has pulled a couple guys out of Wisconsin. Go get yourself a farm boy from Wisconsin. He'll probably play a good offensive line.
Right, yeah. So, exactly.
So, I mean, we'll see. I think, with more time, a pattern will start to emerge. But in terms of getting guys on campus this weekend, the weekend of June 21st, he seems to be more efficient in getting a lot of guys on campus in a couple big weekends and putting on a show. Whereas I think under Tom Allen, it was, all right, we're going to get a small group of players. It's going to be a family type atmosphere. And, we'll see if they fit. So we'll see. Indiana had a couple decommits in the last week or so, but they did early on have a top 25 class that now sits at 54. So, it's recruiting in June.
Right.
But, we'll see. I think a lot of it is, can you win games and stuff like that? But they're very targeted with their offers. I think the previous staff was throwing out offers. Cast a wide net, see what you could bring in.
Sure.
And both can be successful at a place like IU.
Let me ask you this question. When it comes to recruiting in the state of Indiana, how does the Hoosiers look at teams like Michigan, Notre Dame, Ohio State, and then a team like Purdue? And then Louisville, for instance. Like, is there a serious, like, if Ohio State comes in, like, we're going to move our direction somewhere else? Or
you don't want to get – I don't think you just automatically, hey, give up, because there's committable offers, uncommittable offers, or whatever. But I think that with IU, you need to be efficient in what you do and efficient with your resources. Now that includes NIL. The last thing you want to do is get into a bidding war with Ohio State or Michigan. I mean, you could, but you might not get very far. And let's say there's a comparable player in state that, or maybe somebody who's a little bit down in the rankings that that you could evaluate and develop, that you might just say, okay, we're going to let the big dogs fight over this guy. Let's go get this one and not waste our time there. But I don't think it's automatic, Ohio State offered him, we're done. You see it with Juju Lewis, who's the number one quarterback in the 2025 class, who is taking an official to IU, is going to trim his list down to 3, and IU's in his top, 4 or 5. He has a very close relationship with Tino Sinceri, who's IU's quarterback coach, and they're still in it. And they're going up against Auburn, USC, other big boys in in college football, where you say, what is IU doing on this guy's list? So they're not scared of anybody, but you also don't want to say, hey, we're going to put 90% of our resources towards one kid, which we probably will miss out on, and then miss out on 5 other kids that if we had dispersed resources to go get. And so that's a little of the project management on the, if hopefully recruiting's like that on the new video game. So you got to use your recruiting points wisely, right? You can't just dump 500 on one guy, right? And have a one-man recruiting class. So
that's a good point.
But with Louisville, Purdue, and IU, I'd say they're on the same playing field. I think you have, and a lot of it depends on the regionality of the kid. Like if it's a Southern Indiana kid who's near Louisville, maybe you give a slight edge to Louisville. If it's, more towards Central Indiana and Bloomington, slight edge to IU. If it's Northern Indiana and maybe the north half of Indianapolis, slight edge to Purdue. But I would say they're on the same level of, peers in recruiting.
Gotcha. So one of the things that your rival Purdue has been doing the last couple years is that ever since Walters came in, he has made it a priority to come to the state of Ohio and start offering the kids who Ohio State doesn't offer. And he has done last year he nailed a 4-star tight end who Ohio State tried to go after late, and it was too late. He had already developed that relationship with Purdue. He went to Purdue. He's one of the better kids in their 2024 class. He'll be a true freshman this year. And there was several. He came right into Central Ohio, my neck of the woods, right in the shadow of the horseshoe. Took a kid out from Westerville who Ohio State didn't offer, high 3-star. Come on over to Purdue. So he's definitely has a mindset, which we called this the D'Antonio effect. So back when D'Antonio was the head coach at Michigan State, he literally built his program on coming to Ohio and getting every kid Ohio didn't offer, and then saying, because he already had these kids who hated Michigan to begin with. So it was natural for them because they're going to, and then they're spurred by Ohio State, so then they hate them too. So he built an entire program. Like half his roster was from the state of Ohio. I've always said if someone would to take that model and use it as a bordering state school, they would be incredibly successful. And Kentucky has started to do that. If you look at Kentucky, they are recruiting Ohio hard. They stole
Lynn Bowden.
Yeah, they stole a running back right from out the state, who Ohio State wanted, by the way.
He was committed to IU first.
Was he really? Oh my goodness, I didn't know that. So what do you think about like Indiana's chances? Like if you could steal the ear of Cignetti, is this something you would say to him? Hey, we've got to get into Ohio and we've got to start offering these 3-star kids from Ohio who aren't getting looked at by Ohio State, aren't getting looked at by Michigan, aren't getting looked at by Penn State. You can win with these guys. Is that something that Indiana has ever done in the past, or do you foresee them ever doing in the future?
I think they did it with Kevin Wilson a little bit. You brought in Shane Wynn, a couple, I think it's Wes Martins from Olentangy Liberty over there, offensive lineman, Tigray Scales.
Where my wife works, so there you go.
Nice. Little advertising.
Yeah.
Tigray Scales, Marcus Oliver was another guy from Ohio. IU's had real good success going into Ohio, especially when they had Dylan McCullough recruiting that area for them. It cooled off kind of under Tom Allen going into Ohio, and he went into Florida a little bit more and grabbed some of those kind of the same philosophy. Let's grab those 3 stars, maybe borderline 4 stars that don't go to Florida State, Florida, Miami, and bring them up. And look, they got Michael Penix Jr. they stole him out of Florida State's pocket, and he was a Tennessee commit too. So I think it depends on the year, and who knows what NIL and the transfer portal is going to do, and that has to factor in. Can you, and we've seen it with Dabo and Clemson, can you build a sustainable program just out of high school classes? Or do you need to go into the portal, find your core high school kids that you could develop into players that might take a year or two, and then plug holes through the portal? We'll see. And there's now with paying players, who knows what the roster sizes are going to look like. But yeah, Ohio, going into Ohio, grabbing a few kids. Look, Antoine Randall's a Chicago kid. Anthony Thompson was Terre Haute and all that stuff. You could find kids all over the Midwest who've kind of been spurned by one of the big names and all that stuff. But we'll see. I mean, it's such a national game now, and there's no hiding in little podunk town in the Midwest anymore because the internet exists.
You're right.
There's not. Hey, Eric's dad knows a guy in whereversville. He's pretty good. Nobody else knows about him. He's got 10,000 followers on Twitter and all that, and everybody's posted videos. So, unearthing those hidden gems. But yeah, D'Antonio did it perfectly, and it is a blueprint you can exploit. But maybe Cincinnati joining a Power Four conference now comes in and takes some of those kids too.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah, when we did our border wars with the Cincinnati guys from the beer cast, they want that to happen, and it just doesn't seem like that's necessarily been the focus after Luke Fickell left. Luke Fickell was doing that, and it was successful enough to get him to the college football playoff.
Yep.
But then, because that roster was over 65% Ohio kids. And despite being from the state of Cincinnati, as they call it, they don't really consider themselves Ohioans, being down there in Cincinnati. Of course, when you're connected to Kentucky, Indiana like that, I get it. But yeah, it's doable, and it's kind of interesting to me to see who will take the bull by the horns and just do it. It looks like Kentucky's the one that is attempting it right now. Hey, Sammy, tell everybody where they can find your podcast at.
So you could follow our podcast. It's the Hoosier Huddle podcast. We're on Twitter at Hoosier_Huddle. We're on Facebook as well, facebook.com/Hoosier_Huddle, youtube.com/Hoosier Huddle. We have a whole website, not just podcasts, but we do videos on YouTube. We just had one of our writers, Ben, break down the House versus NCAA case and how it might affect the Hoosiers. And then, we're getting ready for the season. We're profiling each player on our 100-day countdown to kickoff. We've started breaking down opponents and all that stuff. If you know anybody who does Western Illinois stuff, give me a holler, because I need to find some stuff on Western Illinois.
I gotcha. Hey, yeah. Well, eventually the college huddle might get them too. We're just we're out there recruiting, seeing who we can snag as we continue to grow that brand. Thank you so much, Sammy, for coming and be a part of Border Wars. We really do appreciate it, and looking forward to doing a collaboration when we meet up later this season. All right.
All right, Eric. Thank you, guys.
Dylan, let me ask you this question. Who is Indiana, or who is Purdue's main recruiting competition? Is it Indiana?
Yeah. No.
Or have you? Okay.
I'd say probably Notre Dame would be up there for sure.
Really?
I think so, because they're like they're a brand, right? Like there's a reason why they're not in a conference. There's a reason, they're kind of their own thing as they're not only a national brand, but then you go over, they're playing in Dublin even, or somewhere in Ireland, I'd assume Dublin. And I know, living in Ohio, there's a ton of Notre Dame fans here, even, even if I agree with them or not. So I would say either Notre Dame, I don't know, Indiana and football. If you're looking at football and basketball, I think there's a bit of a difference. But if we're talking football specifically, I would like to think, and I don't know if Russ thinks otherwise, I would think we have the one up football recruiting against Indiana, just based off our facilities. I think are better, and I'm a homer, granted. Our stadium's a hell of a lot better. I've been to whatever their Memorial Stadium in Bloomington. It's fine. Like, it's not, I think Ross-Ade's a lot better. And Ross-Ade's definitely not the best stadium in the conference. You got the big house, you got you guys, and so on and so forth. But I'd say probably Notre Dame. Yeah, I do. Their helmets are kind of cool. I'll give them that. A little shiny, little chrome domers.
Little leprechauns running around. So here's a great question for you, Russ. And I've been following recruiting religiously for about 15 years now. And Purdue has always sprinkled in an Ohio kid here and there. But last year, and then you already have 2 for 2025, Ohio kids, and you got 2 from last year who are big-time recruits that Ohio State recruited that they did not win. Tight end Tavion Galloway, who played at Pickerington Central, but he originally started, I believe, at Circleville. He's a Circleville kid. And then Coy Beasley, who is a top 150 recruit in the nation, safety from LaSalle High School in Cincinnati, Ohio. That is a pipeline for Ohio State and Notre Dame, Catholic school kid. Walked right into Cincinnati, Ohio, and got that kid. And then, on top of that, as I scroll through the list here of of guys that you picked up from last year. Those were just the two bigger names, but you guys also got Jaden Ball from Bloom Carroll, Ohio, Bloom Carroll High School. You got Tremar Harris from Winton Woods, another Cincinnati product. And then so is this a thing? Like, is this something that Ryan Walters purposely is doing? Is he understands the talent richness in the state of Ohio? And if it's like, if not only can I go get it kids that maybe Ohio State didn't offer, but also if he can start beating Ohio State for kids, like, dude, that is a huge recruiting feather in his cap.
49-20 game, and you look at a guy like Marcus Bailey, a Columbus native, who wasn't even recruited by Ohio State, was with the Bengals, now he's with the Cardinals, and he had the upset ceiling pick 6 to beat Ohio State in 18. So there's a definite bunch of, we've had a few Columbus guys who were either recruited by Ohio State or not that have done pretty good at Purdue. And so, and as a Boiler who lives in Ohio, I love it.
I'm sure you do. I'm sure you do. Just about like when we love going in the state of Indiana.
All right.
Basically anybody we want in football.
All right.
However, it's not happening this year because it looks like Notre Dame's going to snag 2 of the top 3 or 4 kids from the state of Indiana in the class of 2025. To round out this discussion, when it comes to what I call the big 3, Ohio State, the team from Ann Arbor, and Notre Dame,
Michigan.
What? Stop it. That's the third time tonight since we've been recording that you have sworn. Michigan. And now you're getting a lot of money. All right, Chris, we want to thank the Hoosier Huddle and the Boiler Express podcast for their time and in talking to us about recruiting. So overall, border wars, the state of Indiana, the border between Ohio and Indiana. Obviously we want to throw a wall around the state of Ohio. However, it has been very interesting how that Ryan Walters from Purdue has been able to sneak into the state of Ohio and grab some of that talent that either isn't being recruited as heavy or is being ignored by Ohio State. That's not something Purdue has traditionally done, and they're starting to do that a little bit. Ryan Walters ain't no dummy.
That's what we like to call the Mark D'Antonio secret to success.
It is, and
he and Fickell are both doing that to us right now, Eric.
Well, and Indy,
you expect it out of Fickell.
Yeah,
Kentucky as well. Stoops.
Kentucky's really doing it, but So I mean, it's incredibly interesting that Ryan Walters is able to do that. But I also find it interesting that we went over in the state of Indiana. We, like I said at the beginning of this video, we typically get 1 or 2 of their best guys every year, and we're not going to go after the high 3-star, low 4-star guys from Indiana because we got those guys in Ohio,
right?
And we want our Ohio guys.
The exception I would say
if there's
is,
a high 4-star or a 5-star guy in Indiana, we want them. And we wanted those 2 defensive ends. We were going after. We wanted one of them. We got neither one of them.
Yeah, and here's the thing, Eric. I still don't know that with those 2 guys, the recruitment's over. I agree with you. With Zachary, I think the recruitment's over. With Brockshot, that's a kid who I agree. He wants to go to the U. That's over.
And we got 2 already.
And I don't think academically, and don't get me wrong, I love Ohio State. It's where I graduated from. I'm proud of that degree. I just don't think academically we are what John Anthony Hall would want. But you look at guys like Dye, like Shanklin, and maybe even if the opportunity presents itself in the right way, maybe Eugene Hilton Jr. These are guys who I could see, although Luke Fickell's got him. Luke Fickell might not be too willing to let go. But Dye and Shanklin, I think these are guys that could be back in play if things shake out the right way. I would not be surprised to see Larry Johnson and Jim Knowles put on a full court press to see if they can't sway these guys away.
Very interesting. Like, share, subscribe. If you are an Indiana fan, if you're a Purdue fan, if you're a Notre Dame fan, let us know what you think about the state of Indiana recruiting wise in the comments below. Or if you're an Ohio State fan, are you worried that we went over in the state of Indiana thus far? Are you worried about Purdue or someone else coming into the state of Ohio, Kentucky, or what if Marcus Freeman starts sniffing around the top guys from the state of Ohio? That would be rather interesting as well. Let us know your comments in the comment section below. Do you like these border wars? If so, go back and watch the border wars that we had earlier in this year about the state of Ohio in Toledo and Cincinnati. We talked to a Toledo podcast, we talked to a Cincinnati podcast. We got their thoughts on recruiting those cities as well as the state of Ohio. We also talked to them about Kentucky. Which at the time was doing a really good job of recruiting some of the Ohio guys. Go back and watch that video. We're going to be doing more of these as we get closer to the season. We've got the state of up north we need to talk about. We got the state of Kentucky. We have the state of Pennsylvania, and we have the state of West Virginia. So we have 4 more border wars coming your way. Be on the lookout for that. Let us know if you like these videos. Again, please give us a thumbs up, like, share, subscribe. It does help the channel. Till next time, Chris, OH.
IO.
Go Bucks.